everybody. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you who I have not met, I'm Lori from the Beagle Alliance, and we have a couple of team members here. Mary, who is the volunteer and rescue director, she can just wave, which I always say wave, Mary, and B, who is our webmaster and IT. So those are our two team members here. And so I think this is just going to be an awesome, I've been so excited about this night. So we are welcoming Liz Murdoch from Talking with the Dogs. Liz is an animal communicator. And the cool thing about tonight is that she's really going to gear the night towards us as people who want to help in any capacity. So she's going to tell us a little bit about what she does, and then work with us on how we can be more intuitive with either our own animals, but also when we're fostering, when we're working with people to see if they want to foster, etc. So I'm going to be quiet because Liz is going to explain this better. So welcome, Liz. Thank you. And just as a little housekeeping note, I'm just going to say that we're going to change things up a little bit this time. We're not going to send everybody an unlisted YouTube video of this evening. We're just going to tell you right now that we will use some of these clips for social media, and we will publish on YouTube. So if you want to turn your camera off, if you're not into it, go ahead and do that, or send us an email to info@thebeaglealliance.org and just say, look, I don't want to be on video, etc. So anyway, that said, welcome, Liz. Thank you so much for being here. Super excited.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I want to ask a quick question. How many of you have worked with an animal communicator before, or you know something about it? Anyone? Okay. So that's fine. That's fine. Most of the people that I work with never have, and I don't position myself as a psychic. I don't say that I do readings. If you've ever heard someone say, oh, I had a reading of my dog, I feel like I'm having a conversation. And most of my conversations are with dogs and their people over Zoom, very similar to what Yoshi's doing with B. Hi, Yoshi, you wanted to jump up, and so I'll introduce myself. I'll say, hi, Yoshi, I'm Liz, I'm an animal communicator. And it is your big chance to be in the limelight if you want to share anything. And typically, like Yoshi is already saying, I get a knowing sense. Like usually I'm told to be quiet. And so Yoshi's, I'm getting a knowing sense. And I hear that Yoshi will sometimes make a whimpering kind of noise to get attention when B is working. And Yoshi wants to be included. And Yoshi's like, oh, you know, I'm glad that I don't have to be quiet for once in my life kind of thing. I can be on this call. So is that something that that Yoshi, you can verify that Yoshi makes these sort of whimpers, like I want to be included, hurry up, be done?
Yeah, she absolutely does. And this is kind of not the norm. Like, it's interesting that she's come up and wants to sit here now, because I mean, she does occasionally, but not very often, and not this long like this. So
she'll stay the whole time. So that's, yeah, I know, Yoshi. Okay, so that's what everybody says to me, and that's why I keep doing this, because I know it makes a difference. And 99% of the people say exactly what B just said, is my dog usually doesn't behave this way. So I am doing tonight's get together because I actually got started as an animal communicator working with rescues. And I ended up working for Lab Rescue in Northern California, because we had a black lab who passed away and my family was ready for another dog. And I was like, I'm not. And I said, but okay, I'll foster. And so we ended up at Lab Rescue and ended up keeping both of the fosters that they sent us. So I was like, don't send me any more fosters. I'll do something else. And so they had gotten to know me and my work, interviewing potential adopters, interviewing potential fosters, working at the adoption fairs. And so they asked me if I would be willing to meet some of the dogs that when they were in our area where we lived, that people had called and said, I have a lab to place, and they would send me out. And I would go and I would meet the dogs for about 20 to 30 minutes in whatever environment. Typically it was the house, but sometimes if I had a sense that, oh, I don't think I want to go to that house, I would meet the person. They would bring the dog to a park. And I would then sit on my phone or in my car and just write about what the dog wanted, not realizing that that was anything unusual. I would be like, this dog wants an active life. And I just had these knowings. And I would then email them off to the person who sent me out to go meet this dog. And they kept sending me more and more and more. And what they said is that they were able to place dogs more effectively than they had before. I was like a secret weapon in figuring out how to get a dog placed in a good fit. And so I loved the work a lot. And when I moved to Southern California, I was grieving that job. And I would tell people I need to work with dogs. And people would say, well, you have 3 dogs. Why do you need to go work with more dogs? And I was like, because it's my give back. And hello, so it's my give back. So anyway, I couldn't replicate that with another foster because I was an unknown. And I ended up at an animal communication class, learned the skills, and realized during all the practice sessions that I could turn it into a business. And as time has gone on, where I do individual sessions, similar to talking like with Bee and Yoshi, where we might have 30 minutes and we would go on and Yoshi, what else do you want to say? I found that I miss being in community, and I don't want to, it's still nagging at me, the rescue aspect of it. And that's why I'm really happy to share with all of you, because I know that rescue, what you're doing today in rescue and with these dogs may be, something that you're not going to be doing in 3 years from now in exactly the same way. But if I can help you, if I can give you another tool to make your work better or more satisfying, or help you figure out, you know what, I think I would like to help in this part, then I feel like I'm doing something with, 1, the skills that I know work, and 2, advocating for the animals, because that's, people say that what's unique about my animal communication sessions is it's clear that I'm advocating for what the animals want. And I think that's what a lot of people in rescue are doing. So that's why I'm here and how I got here. So I don't want to make it just talking at you. Does anyone have a question? Or Lori, do you have something that I should add to this now?
No, I think that's perfect, Liz. And I love how you're tying it into the rescue world, because the way we work with animals, of course, isn't just our own animals. I think we're all here because we probably have our own animals and love them, but also want to help in general. And so I think this is just a perfect sort of prelude to what you're about to say. So yeah, I love it. Okay. And also right, so I just want to say that I'm going to cry, because I just want everyone to know that Liz personally helped me with my Bee before he passed. And it was just the greatest experience. And it made the entire process as tolerable as it could be. And of course, that has nothing to do with Liz. It just has to do with nobody wants to lose an animal. So anyway, go ahead, Liz.
So no, the work with animals that are, navigating sort of the end of life time period is something that I've really come to love, especially since I have a dog that passed away in March. And I will say, I'm trying to keep it condensed for our time together now. And I always offer, if you want to touch base, any of you, you can go to my website, and I offer a free 15-minute sort of consult, get to know each other. So, but the animals crossing over, they give me information that's very specific. So, there were times where Lori had questions like, well, what does he think about this? Or, is it time? And she would have other people with her on the call some of the time. And I could get such specific information that allowed her to make choices that she felt more empowered, not coming from a place of panic or, oh gosh, what should I do? But getting to a place of more confidence of, okay, this is the right decision for us, no matter how personal it may be and challenging. I feel good about my decision based on this information that Liz was able to share about either me or my dog that there's no way she would have known. So that's why I like dealing with both behavior issues, but also that end of lifetime period, because it can be very confusing. So how this can apply to all of you is when I teach, I put a big emphasis on tuning into yourself. And if some of you have sort of explored this or considered, or I get a knowing, or maybe you haven't thought about it, but you do, is like, when I'm meeting potential adopters, I just know this, and I might think about somebody. And I found that when I was doing adoptive families interviews, Lab Rescue's rule was the family had to have 2 interviews, because what they told person number 1, they often omitted with person number 2, and then we would compare notes. And I remember one conversation, I was told, we think this is the one. I'm like, okay. And I was talking with this woman, and she was talking about her job and the drive time. And to me, I just got this bad feeling, like, this isn't adding up. And so I kept going, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. So what you're saying is you work 8 hours and your husband works, 9, and it was clear there was no way that this puppy was going to be home for a very long period of time. And so she said, oh, well, that's okay. We have coverage. I said, well, who's going to take care of it? Well, our high school neighbor girl. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a 5-month-old black lab who I still have because they didn't pass my test. But anyway, so it's those kinds of things that if I can say, yes, when you have those feelings, whatever you do, keep going, so that I tell my students that when you get a feeling that something's not right or something is right, that you can go from 1 sentence to 4 sentences. It can be 3 or 4, but get to the descriptors. And that's the kind of thing with Lori. I remember saying something about Beags, and she's like, well, and it's like, I hate being general with people, because they're making, in her case, very big decisions on treatment and medicine and what she's doing. And so I just know with all of my students and myself, and I want to empower all of you, that when you get an I think in animal communication, whether or not you explore animal communication further or not, but in the work that you do, I want you to consider when you find yourself saying, I think, and how can you get that I think to I know? And going, and a great exercise is taking it into like more descriptions where you're describing, this is a good match for this dog, or this dog, as Mary was talking before you all came on, we were talking about a Beagle, not being ready to be placed in a long-term home. Is like, well, how do we know that? So in the first step of the animal communication, it's how do we get to our knowings of thinking versus knowing? And so a big part of that is clearing out our preconceived ideas, where we don't just look at a dog or a person, a family, which, as some of you may know who work with the adopters, who will show up at an adoption fair, which is what we did at Lab Rescue sometimes, and say, oh, I saw his picture on Instagram. I know that, Fido is the one for me. And we're like, okay, well, did you fill out a form? Yes, we look at their form and we're like, they don't have a yard. This is a 2-year-old dog and they're in an apartment, just these things, because they're all excited. And so they clearly haven't put aside their preconceived ideas, but for all of you, I want to empower you to put away that and be open to figuring out how you get from your thinking to your knowing. And for some people, it's meditation. You hear that a lot in certain circles. Oh, just meditate and you'll know. And I'm a little different in that I think meditation works great for some people, but other people get really clear and into their knowing space when they've prayed, or they've gone for a run, or they've taken a shower. And so again, it's the more you make it your own and you get comfortable at, you know what, this is what works for me, the more effective it is. Does that make sense? You want to add anything, Lori?
Yeah, Liz, I do. I mean, that makes total sense because I'm a runner and I live in the middle of nowhere in Manitoba. So I like to go in the woods and get that, that thing. But I'm going to just pause for a moment because Laura had her hand up. So I'm going to jet back to her. She might have had something from previous what you said, but also Chris's dog came up, and I don't know, Chris, if that's your Invigo survivor, but I have a feeling maybe, yeah, that, so I'd be interested after Laura's question, what maybe Chris's dog is saying.
Okay, very patient. Yeah, you're good at being patient. Okay, that's for sure. Okay, so Laura, what's your
Laura,
question?
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Hi everyone. I'm so sorry I have my camera off, but Lori can attest to my internet is really bad, and my face will freeze in really awkward positions. So I just have a confession. I wanted to confess something before we started. So when this came, and like, yeah, okay, so let me explain. So when this came up from the Beagle Alliance to join this workshop, I was like, well, I have a shelf full of, dog psychology and dog behavior books that I've read them all and blah, blah, blah. And then I thought, do I really need to go to this? And then I thought, well, you know what? I'd rather be a learn-it-all than a know-it-all. And I feel like I'm going to be open. There's going to be something that I'm going to learn. I just know it. And like, I'm already writing stuff down right now, for sure. And yeah, and the other thing too is I haven't put in an application yet to be a foster for the Beagle Alliance yet. Nothing's really come up my way in my part of the country, but this is also, just to score brownie points with Lori as well. That I've been to this training. So anyway, I just wanted to, say that that's my confession, that at first I was like, oh, I've got every book out there on dog behavior and dog psychology. But no, I want to put that attitude away and just come with a really, really open mind. And I've already written some things down that, are just different than any book that's on my shelf. So thank you.
Oh gosh. Well, you're welcome. That makes me feel really good, because there are times where I have felt, not as much now, but every so often it'll creep up like, what am I doing? Because there are the scientists and the dog trainers especially, who are like you, Laura, who have the books and they're like, well, this isn't proven and whatever. And I'm like, but I mean, as Lori can testify, that there's too many weird things that animals share with me that is made a difference, that I know it's a matter of time, that more people are saying, I've got to pay attention to this. And as I advocate for getting people to, work a little harder to get into their knowings, to justify why they can say, I mean, there are things I told Lori that I was like, well, Lori, I really want you to look into A, B, and C. And she's like, oh, okay, well, all right. And then she would, and she'd be like, oh my gosh, that was so important. And it was only because I was sitting there saying, this is what Beags has shared with me.
Yeah.
And so that is exactly why I am doing this, why I'm doing it for free, because I feel like I owe it to the dogs. I've sort of been there with the foster fairs. I've done all those kinds of things that I'm like, at this point, with the abilities and experience that I have, I I should be teaching people like you or planting seeds, even if it doesn't change you or you don't look into it until next year or something. So thank you, Laura, for being open about that. And, you know, the other thing I wanted to say about the animal behavior part is that there's space for all of that. Just like when we have a child in our life who might be sick, we would take the child to a doctor. And when we want our child to, I'm drawing a parallel for a dog, you know, we take them to school, like training or something. But sometimes when a child needs something, what they just need is a hug or someone to talk to them in a loving, kind way. And it's not about the behavior books or, you know, the healthy diet. Those are all important, but sometimes it's just about love and how we communicate. And so that's what I'm hoping to, you know, have in my book, Laura, when I get my book out, since you agreed and affirmed that there's not a book out yet. So anyway, thank you. So, Chris, what is your dog's name?
Her name is Katori.
Katori, hi, I'm Liz. I see your eyes looking at me. I do. I know. So Katori, you get to say, you don't have to sit quietly. Right now is your chance to say whatever you want. I see you move and you're thinking about this. So Katori does not like to be cramped in any way. That was a huge issue. Hates it. I can feel it. That was like, it's like, that was the worst of the trauma, was her body being confined. And when you know how people will say, oh, the dog doesn't like, you know, hands coming in because she was hit. People assume that about Katori. Is showing me that with her, it's not so much being touched, it's her body is unwinding this cramped feeling. It's very uncomfortable. She's still working on it. I can feel it. And do you do the massage, sort of like healing hands on her and just massaging her body?
No, I haven't. I give her a lot of belly rubs, but
okay. So I want you to consider something where you take your hands, and sometimes I will tell people, I think I did this with Lori at times. Hi. Okay. So Dave, take your fingers and like on her back. I want you to notice the difference between when you touch her with your fingers versus here. And we're going to watch how she's going to respond different. I already see the difference. When you put your hands down, the heart energy sort of comes down and it elongates. Can anyone else see her relaxing?
Yeah. 100%.
That I want you to, like later tonight, when she's laying down, do it with both hands. And it's sort of like going down the sides of her body. And just like you're ironing out wrinkles from a sheet. And it will help her elongate her body because she still has this memory of being confined. It's sort of like this. And that is what she's showing she wants help with, is getting that done, because her essence, it's like her essence is trapped in that body physical memory. Is what she's sharing with me.
Okay.
Okay, so when I'm done sharing and I feel like I've done it in a way that is accurate for the animal, I get that breath kind of thing. Do you want to add anything that you know about her body being cramped? You don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, I mean, she still has a lot of PTSD issues that we're dealing with, the constant running around in circles, you know, which I think is because she was cramped in that cage, and she does that before she goes out and when she wants to come in. So, I mean, she does have a lot of issues of being in a lab because she spent her entire life there until we got her like that. So we're dealing along with that, along with some other issues that she had. Just as one of the speakers on the last town hall had stated, that a couple, it's like, oh, look, she's wanting to shake. Well, she wasn't shaking. She was actually giving her paw up because that's what they did in the lab.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are kind of misunderstanding, some of the signs. So we kind of look for that and see what kind of helps her kind of decompress a little bit. So we kind of give her free rein to do what she wants to do and be herself as a beagle and not feel like she needs to, behave or do certain things, just kind of letting her be and let her acclimate on her own time.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great example of people making the assumptions and how it's hard to put them aside. Well, so in my sessions, I often give people homework. And if you're open, I want you to consider this, the thing about like ironing her out. And you can both do it physically with her. And if you meditate or visualize anything, you can also sort of visualize the space around her and ironing that out and expanding her energy field, like the crate, as if it's a tent, and just keep getting it bigger and bigger so that that memory is undone, because it's like she likes it with you, but her body is still back somewhere else. And she's trying to undo that, sort of like when we're trying to yawn, but we can't yawn. It's like she's trying to let that go.
Yeah.
So anyway, I hope that helps.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. We will definitely be trying that.
Yeah, this spreading things out. So, okay, any other questions? Because I keep going. Okay.
I do have a question.
Okay.
What is a good book? I know that you haven't written your book just yet, but what would be a good, even if it's not about animal communication, but a book that would allow me to just tap into my knowing, and just, yeah, I guess, try to, something that will help me trust my intuition, because I do get knowings and I do get feelings about my dog, but I kind of overthink things, and I think it's a kind of a muscle that I need to exercise when trusting in my intuition. So what would be a good book?
So Kim Chesney has a book on intuition that she wrote that's pretty good. It's not about animals at all, but it's about intuition. And you'll find whatever any of you do outside of your dog work is people are more comfortable talking about it in business. And they'll say, well, most top leaders, they trust their gut, trust your intuition. And your intuition on its own, it can be correct only about 60% of the time. And this is why I like working with dogs, is because I have many years working with dogs and with people as an educator. So I feel like I'm a good fit because my intuitive knowings are filtered through my experience. And so to practice with your dog, for any of you, if you just start with your intuition, but then remember there are things that you do know about your dog. So if you're, like I'll just use Lori for an example. So she loved her dog. Her dog was ailing, and yet she needed a sounding board. And so when I could give my intuitive messages that I was receiving, she could then use that. She didn't even have to tell me all the details. There were things I have no idea until later she told me, but she could use that because she knew her dog and what was right. And that's what all of you can do when you understand that you're getting an intuitive sense. Like any of you who, like Dave, when he took his dog into his home, he had a knowing, this is the dog for us. I'm going to do this, rather than no. So I'm like, let's get you to a point where you're into your knowing more frequently. Okay. So Kim Chesney's book talks about intellectually about the intuition part of it. And I think that's a good starting point.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. And I put YouTube in the Zoom. I just threw a YouTube there, you guys. I just quickly looked. her up.
Yeah,
So
perfect.
yeah.
And she does free things every so often. But it's very, it's well done. It's basic and it's simple to make sense of. But I want to, again, empower you to trust that you know stuff about your dog right now. And what we want to do is have you be more confident. And that's why I say, when you get a knowing, this is for any of you, about your dog, take it from one sentence to 4. If you think, something's wrong with my dog, for instance, well, rather than just saying, oh, should I go to the vet? I'll tell people, I want you to write it down so that you have more information when you go, so it's effective. He hasn't had water for 4 days, or, whatever the things you're noticing, the more information we have to support a feeling, it helps us get to greater accuracy. And like for me, when I'm working with the dog, I get that breath, this relief that I know, okay, I'm done. I did it. And I ask people, do you need clarification? And sometimes they do, because a word I chose, like shoe, one time, the woman was like, no, it was in a group like this. And I said, well, I see this shoe. And she's like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, let me go back. And I said, no, it's a shoe. I drew it. And she said, well, could it be a slipper? And I was like, yeah, it's a shoe, a slipper. And she's like, oh, now I know what it means. So you just keep going until, for me, I get that breath. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So the next thing. Okay. So tuning in with a dog. So once you get into like, okay, I'm going to do this, then, and it's even like with Chris with the hands on his dog, or any of you who are trying something, you're going to practice your knowing, or, it doesn't have to be, because like I said, I know in rescue, you're called on to do so many things. You may have a gut feeling about a potential adopter and something doesn't line up. I want you to get into how you tune in with whether it's the person or the animal. So I'm going to focus on the dogs, but you could apply this to a person if you feel inclined that you're trying to justify a sense that you're getting. But when I tune in with the dog, so we'll go back. Hey there, Missy, do you want to share anything else with me? So I will keep going until I start to get something. And you want to get it so that you've got a connection and a rapport that you feel. Sorry, my phone's ringing. All right, I'm going to keep going. It'll stop. Anyway, you want to keep going until you feel that connection. Like Yoshi was here and shared something, and I felt very clear. And then I was done and Yoshi left. And that's how it works. So that when you get a connection, when you're practicing with a dog, you can, what is your dog? Catonia?
Well, I've got the other one now, but yeah, Katori is the one that we rescued.
Oh, and who's this?
This is Savior.
Okay, so Savior wants to chime in. Okay, so Savior, yeah, you want to turn too. So I'm going to show Savior, what is it that you want to share? I know this happens where dogs will take turns. Savior, I can't see your eyes. I like to see the eyes. There we go. So Savior, what is it that you want? Oh, Savior's like, I don't have the body issues. I have food issues. I'm all about food. So yeah, right. Savior's all about food. Savior so I'm getting these feelings. Savior, tell me about the food. He's showing me like something yellow. He likes, I don't know whether it's banana or scrambled. He can get fixated on food, but he's thanking you for working with him on his food issues, whatever those have been. And
he's got pancreatitis, so we've been working on his food issues.
So it just flows with me. So Savior, do you want to, I know, I see you. So see how he responds, he moves. So Savior, I was getting an image of this food issue and Savior waiting patiently. I get a stomach gurgling. Savior, what do you want to say? Do you have a message that you want to share Okay, so he says, Dave didn't really want to take me at first. No, wait, you're Chris.
Right.
He's like, Chris wasn't really crazy about this idea at first. Is that true? Because he seems to think you weren't really, this wasn't really your idea in the beginning, but you've come around to it and now you're like totally committed.
Oh, yeah. He's my buddy.
Yeah. But he said you had your doubts about him at first because he turned out to be a lot of work, but he's showing gratitude is what he wants to thank you.
Yeah.
But I think he's saying, I'm getting that he wants to show the shift that he knows how much more work he was, and he's really thanking you with this food issue and the messes that he's made and you've had to deal with. So, so anyway, so Xavier, are we good? Because I want to keep going and tell people. So that's how I sort of get a tuning in. And then when I receive messages, as you notice, I was describing that I felt him at the feet looking up, and I compared about the whole crate issue because I know that a lot of the beagles have been in crates and cages, and he didn't show that he had that issue. He's out and he's used to being out in the open, but he has the food issue. Yeah. And so that's where I'm like, it's important to get specific so people know that it's not just entertainment, but it's sharing information that someone can actually use or feel validated that they're on the right path with their dog, or depending if we were doing like a big long session, that because I've shared information that he can verify, oh yeah, she got right away that this dog has an eating sensitivity where the other one has spatial sensitivity. When I go on and tell them more things about their dogs, they're more inclined to take it seriously. And in the work that all of you are doing, it helps you because, you know, you're making big commitments with how you're placing these dogs or how you're determining whether families are actually ready for an animal. So that's why I think it's good to plant seeds to help you all sort of understand this part of working with dogs and their people. Any questions? Okay, I'll keep going. So I have a workbook that I use, and I'm using my 6-week coaching program, drawing from it to cover the basis for you so I can get it all in. So receiving message, and then there's the sharing of it. And this can be like, for me, I shared it with, some of you about what messages the dogs are sharing. But for you, you might be sharing with each other about a dog that you're rescuing. And that's where it comes back to being really specific so that the other person can hear you. If you have a feeling about something and you're like, well, I can tell you 2 reasons why, but I'm not at the 4 reasons why I think that. You want to learn how to also say, like whether it's to Lori, for instance, Lori, I have a feeling this dog's just not ready yet, even though this family is really anxious to get the dog tomorrow. And the more specific you can share it with another person, the better, as you witness me sharing the messages, the better it's going to be received, not to prove yourself right, because I don't ever feel like I have that goal. I just want to be heard as validated that I was able to relay what the animal was wanting to another person. So that's what I want to try and empower you to do and consider when you share messages that may not seem, like, well, the dog hasn't eaten for 3 days, which is very, sort of research clinically based, but when it's based on sort of a feeling, or you had an image, I get images like with the food, how you can get to a point of knowing, like I felt pretty confident that Xavier had a food issue. So anyway, so that's another part of making it actually work, is how we share it with other people. And I specifically don't try and convince people who aren't open to this to listen to me, because I'm not trying to change anybody, but I want to be heard. And so again, if you have a knowing about something, but the person's probably not receptive, you can do what you can. But then at the end of the day, I say, don't worry about trying to change them. We can't right now, but we can plant seeds. Okay. Any questions? Okay. So then, as you develop your practice in whatever way you might be exploring this, reviewing for accuracy is more about how you're helping the animal than about proving that you're right and how good you are, but how you're growing and getting it to be right for a person and their dog. So like with Lori, I'm going to use you an example because you opened up to it. Like with Beags, I would say things, and this happens a lot with people. People will call me up and they'll say, "Is it my dog's time? We're scheduled for tomorrow, but I just want to check with you," because they're feeling really vulnerable. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, let me see. I push everything aside. And this one vet who called me up, she was very rattled and she needed help. And I said, no, it's too rushed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, who am I to tell this person no? And so I was like, it's too rushed. Your dog is sharing with me that your dog is well enough to wait a couple days. And this was we were speaking on a Sunday. They were going to do it on a Monday. And I said, your animal is showing me that you're way too rushed tomorrow, that Wednesday would be better. Now, this person just booked an appointment on my website. And I mean, I knew the person. I'd talked to them before. But anyway, so we ended the session and she wrote back and she said, you were so right. Not so much that I wanted to be right, but she said that she had appointments all that Monday afternoon and would have been a basket case. I think she emailed me after the fact on Wednesday and she was thanking me. But that's where those kinds of stories empower me to just keep going and encouraging people like you all to consider this in the work that you're doing. And like I said, I used to work with the rescue. I was evaluating dogs like every week. I was driving all over the Bay Area and I would meet these dogs and I'd go into homes and my daughter would be like, do I have to get out of the car? And I'm like, no, I'll just wait here. I'll be back in 20 minutes. But I couldn't not do it. And so you don't know in the rescue world where you're going to end up going. But I believe, because I've been doing this with rescues for probably 16 years now, that once you're doing it, it's in you. So I'm just going to say, here's a tool that you can draw on, whether it's follow me till my book comes out or start, reading Kim Chesney's book or learning how to get more from some of the things you think into your knowing. And that's my greatest hope for all of you, is to just start to think, how can I get into my knowing even stronger to do good for the animals? All right, questions?
No, but I do have a comment, Liz, because I think that summed it up perfectly. And I feel that with my own experience. I think I wanted answers from you because I wanted to abdicate a little bit from the decision, which I'm sure we can all relate to when our dog is at that point. And just to share with you guys is that I think in the end that my dog orchestrated the entirety of it. And my friend Holly just jetted off, but she's actually on our board of directors and she is a homeopath for animals and was a vet tech for years. And she was treating my dog and I was working with Liz at the same time. And in the end, I think that I didn't really know it was the end. And maybe I was probably in a little bit of denial, not going to lie. He had shown improvement. And so I think I was just completely on this, like, we're going to beat this. But in the end, in retrospect, he ended up, very interestingly enough, working it out that the day I knew it, he had to leave, he saw my stepson, and that worked out in some magical way. He saw his 2 healers, which Holly's not on the screen right now, but she was one of them. He shouldn't have probably made it that long, but he ended up seeing exactly who he needed to see. And it was just magical. And part of it was listening to Liz and who was listening to him. And so I could kind of just take the steps. And even though I think some of those steps were for me, which I'm sure you can all relate to, it worked out the best that it could possibly work out, if I were to say it that way.
Yeah, thank you. That's what people say. I mean, I had a woman whose dog was about to pass, and he had actually died on the operating table, and he came to. He had like a near-death I mean, he was flatlined, and he came back to life after 10 minutes, and the vets were just freaked out. And she called me and she said, I brought him home. This is what happened. And I said, well, he wasn't ready to go. And she's like, well, why? The doctors said they'd never seen anything like this. And I said, well, he wasn't going to leave without saying goodbye to you. And so it was, long story, he lived for a couple months after that, and he was amazing. And when the time came, she said, where should we euthanize him? Does he care? And I'm like, well, let me see. And, you know, they asked me, I've never been to this woman's home. And I'm like, oh gosh, you know, even though I've been doing this for so long, I still get these, you know, these very big questions that are so personal. And so I said, well, he says to do it out front by the tree. And she's like, well, there is no tree out front. And I'm like, oh gosh. I go, okay, well, that's what he said. So she goes, okay, well, can you ask him again? And I said, sure. And I said, well, he says to ask your husband. And so she goes, really? I go, yes, he'll know. Ask your husband. And I was done. That was, I didn't have that breath feeling. So as we were finishing the call, she said, I just want to show you the tree in the backyard. And I'm like, okay. So she takes me into the backyard, and I'm like, oh gosh, this is not right. And then she shows me this tree. She goes, is this the tree? I said, well, it looks like that. But no, that's not the tree that I'm seeing. Ask your husband. So we end. She calls me a couple days later. They've had their ceremony, and she wanted to talk. And I said, where did you do it? And she said, out front under the tree. And I was like, under what tree? And she said, the one off to the side that I never think of, because it's not by the front door, but it's over to the side. And she said, the amazing thing is when she sits in her office, she looks out on that tree, and she has this bond with her dog that she could, as Lori said, couldn't have orchestrated it any better.
Yeah.
And over and over, you know, it's not about me being right and look what I did, but it's like, look what happens when people align with their knowing. She knew to ask me those questions. I just say, if you've got time with me, you can ask me whatever you want. You don't have to tell me your questions. I can just find out what the animal wants. Like Savior just showed me food was an issue. I didn't even ask Savior if food was an issue. But when people, from my experience, learn how to follow the process of clearing things out, being open to receiving it, being committed to describing it in a way that is trying to do like Beag's justice, to get it right for Beag, so Lori knows how to use this information in a meaningful, very personal way, that it changes their world and their experiences are different. And you know, there was a dog I interviewed to come into the lab rescue, and got an alert, and it was the most sad dog. I was like, oh my gosh, the dog wouldn't even look at me. Like the dogs look at me over Zoom. Well, in person, you would think for the most part, they've known me forever because they just respond. This dog would not respond to me. And I was like, oh dear, something's, he knows that I want to take him. He was so bonded. I met him at the man's work, and I had to take a picture to send to the rescue, and he just wouldn't even look at the camera. So I said to the man, are you sure? It was an allergy issue, they were saying. I said, are you sure it's the allergies. And I said, because your dog does not want to leave. And he goes, yeah, it's going to be really hard. And I was like in my car, like, that dog is not going to make it. It's going to like die of a broken heart. Anyway, so I got home and the rescue called me and said, you're not going to believe this, but the vet called and said that the kid's doctor, it's not an allergy. They can keep the dog. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what a miracle. But there was just no way. So getting in tune and advocating for these dogs with a new level of knowing, to me, it's life-changing for the dogs. So I think you got the point. I'm pretty committed to this.
Agreed. Agreed.
So
Well-
I know we're coming on the hour. Does anyone have any questions? Like I said, you're welcome to reach out to me. I like to keep these sort of short just so I'm not going on, but I'm certainly welcome your questions.
I do have a comment. I just want to say that I've worked with Liz multiple times, and she has helped tremendously with my relationship with my dog Titan. And I refer her to everyone I know. And, you know, in just a few words, she's legit, and I highly recommend her services.
Oh, thank you. So we had, I think about the first time we met where it was sort of an afterthought. I tuned into Titan and we talked about whatever was the concern and what Titan was sharing. That was often the dogs will share answers before the person even shares them with me. It's just weird how it works out. But at the end of our first conversation, it was like, oh, his ear hurts. And she's like, really? And he was not showing any symptoms. And this is why being descriptive is so important, because when you send someone to the vet, especially in Los Angeles, it can be $800. And I feel very responsible if I say to someone, I really think you need to go to the vet as soon as possible, which is what I told Chris. Your dog is in a lot of pain and I think it's affecting. And she's like, really, are you sure? And I said, yes. I said, sometimes I tell people to watch it or take notes until the next time they go. But with your dog, I think you need to go fairly soon. And what happened, Chris?
Well, that night, I had a very vivid dream of the doctor. So I took him to the clinic, and I had never met this doctor. Her name was Dr. Richards. And for some reason I thought, oh, it's a male. So that night, after I had a session with Liz, I had a dream that I was at the clinic, and that this young doctor, female doctor, came in and said, we did the swab and we didn't find any infections. And I knew in my gut that there was something going on in his ear. So exactly that happened. When she walked in, she looked exactly like like the doctor in my dream. I had no idea that she was going to be that young and a female doctor. So she came in and she said, my vet tech took a swab and we didn't find any infections. And she said, I'm going to do it this time and I'm going to go even deeper. And she did it a second time, and then she did find the infection. So yeah. And she put him on medications, and he felt so much better afterwards.
So that's a great example too of advocating for your dogs and your feelings. And Chris and I have talked several times, and she is somebody who often has dreams after we've talked. And that goes back to the point that I said that we all have different ways of tuning in. And so whether you're reading Kim Chesney's book or anybody else's guides to harnessing your intuition, know that for you, it might be the running in the woods, but it also might be through dreams. There's many different ways. And what matters is paying attention to you and yourself. Okay. Any-
That's a great example. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, that's a really great example. Liz, can you talk about your cards for a moment? And I put them on my desk and I can completely jet off the camera.
I
and-
got them
good.
ready. Okay. So part of my mission, I sit here and I talk to dogs. Pretty much I do it here, and I talk to a lot of dogs practically every day. Some days I'm just doing one right after the other. And so I realized, and that's why I started my podcast, is I wanted to share what the dogs were sharing. And so I have a podcast talking with the dogs. And then I started teaching again more. And I thought, you know what? I want to help people. So I created these cards with questions. And you could do this with a family if somebody is, so none of them are yes or no questions. They're all, how do you and your dog resemble each other? If your dog were to give a TED talk, it would be about. And they're open-ended questions that I figure anybody can use to in their family to get to know their dogs better, but also like teachers who are doing work with their kids or therapists wanting to elicit conversation, or if you're placing a dog with a family that already has a dog and you want to get to know them better, here's all sorts of, there's 75 prompts. So I created these cards. They just came out within the last month, and I'm happy to spread the word about them because I personally describe your dog's life. Most people, you'd be amazed, they hire me to get answers. Typically, like, is it their dog's time? Or my dog has a behavior issue and I'm trying to figure out how to help my dog. But sometimes I'll say, do you have any questions? They'll say, yeah, does my dog know I love him? And I'm like, yeah, that people don't know. Does anyone find your dog intimidating? That people don't think about their dogs as much because they're just in relationship. So anyway, they're dog talk cards, and I ship them out. You can buy them on my website. And I've told Lori I'll sell anything and give a % to the Beagle Alliance because I want to support. So this is how I'm doing it now since I don't foster.
Well, thank you, Liz, and thank you, everybody. So yes, the cards are amazing. I think the cards are great. We're going to try to work. We're just creating our shop right now on Beagle Alliance. So we're going to try to have Liz's cards. We're just working on it right now. But the cards are great too. I think they'll be really great for potential fosters and adopters. I know that Mary and I are always asking, questions, especially if we have fosters who aren't intending to adopt. We want to know about the dog so that we can find the perfect adopter. And that's always sometimes tricky. So I think the cards are amazing for that. And you're right. They just help you to tune in to your dog in general and think about things that you wouldn't normally think about. On a funny note, I had one of my friends tell me the other day that she would take my new Beagle Poppy to obedience training. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, are you secretly telling me my dog is misbehaved? And also, I just believe that taking a Beagle to obedience training was like throwing money in the toilet. Like, what is your point in taking a Beagle to obedience training? They're never going to figure it out. But anyway, so I think you're right. We're in relationship with our dogs and we don't really see all that we really sometimes need to see. But anyway, thank you, Liz. Again, I'm going to remind everyone that we're going to post this. So we'll have this on YouTube. So please email us in the next 24 hours, info@thebeaglealliance.org if you don't want your face or name on this, because we'll edit it out. Otherwise, we're going to use clips in social media going forward. And on YouTube, of course. And so for some of the things I put in the chat, and links to Liz, etc., we'll have all that available so that you can reach out to Liz. And of course, thank you, Liz, for offering to donate a portion and hopefully
sure.
Yeah, soon. So, and I thought I had something else to say, but maybe I didn't. So if you have any questions, please email us. And again, as usual, this has been just an awesome evening, and I always enjoy spending time with you, Liz. So thank you so much.
Oh, me too. And it's really nice. I really like the rescue, the work, and also I appreciate what you're all doing, and, you know, not to worry if you reach out later, I'll still be here doing this. So, anyway, reach out as you need to.
Thank you. Yeah. And it takes a village. Everyone has their place in working with the animals in some way. So thank you. Appreciate you all.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. And, you know, I just want to say this was what I was going to say, actually. So next town hall is in November. It's at Chris's suggestion. It's with John Raymer from Kindness Ranch. He's been running his sanctuary for years and years, and he was very instrumental in placing a lot of the in Vigo rescued animals, including Chris's dog and many that Mary and Liza have in their house right now. So it'll be a fun night. So we'll get that to you guys as well. So thank you. And thank you again, Liz.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for being so patient and listening.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.